He thought money could erase her womb, silence her choices, and bury her future. But 9 months later, when he saw her glowing and pregnant, he realized the abortion he paid for never happened, and the child she carried bore his blood. But what if this baby was never his to claim anymore? Sometimes the cost of betrayal is more than money. It's trust, dignity, and love. When wealth collides with pride and power meets a woman's silent resilience, truth doesn't just surface, it explodes. Before we dive deep into this roller coaster of betrayal, power, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned. Because this isn't just a love story. It's a battlefield where hearts are the casualties. The courtroom in the old county courthouse building exuded an oppressive quietness, a hush that pressed down with the weight of unyielding granite slabs stacked one upon another. The high ceilings, adorned with intricate plaster moldings that had cracked slightly over decades of use, amplified every minor sound into something ominous. Sunlight filtered through tall, narrow windows framed by heavy velvet drapes, casting long shadows across the polished oak benches where a handful of spectators sat in rigid silence. Mostly family members of other cases, their faces etched with weariness from hours of waiting. The air carried a faint, musty scent of aged paper and polished wood, mingled with the sharper tang of ink from legal documents. At the long, scarred conference table positioned before the judge's elevated bench, Naomi Ellis occupied the seat nearest the aisle. Her hands rested flat on the table's surface, but her palms were pressed together in her lap beneath it, fingers interlaced with such force that her knuckles blanched to the color of bleached bone. She wore a simple navy dress that she had chosen carefully that morning, not for elegance, but for its armor-like quality, a barrier against the vulnerability she felt creeping in. Her dark hair, usually loose and wavy, was pulled into a tight chignon at the nape of her neck, as if containing it could also contain the storm raging inside her chest. Directly across the table from her sat Julian Stone, her soon-to-be ex-husband, his posture as unyielding as the custom-fitted Armani suit that encased his broad shoulders. The fabric, a deep charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, hugged his frame with the precision of a second skin, its crisp lines and subtle sheen proclaiming not just affluence, but an unassailable dominance. The suit's tailoring accentuated the sharp angles of his jaw and the straight line of his tie, a silk burgundy that matched the understated gold cufflinks glinting at his wrists. Julian's dark hair was impeccably combed back, not a strand out of place, and his shoes, polished Italian leather, reflected the faint overhead lights like mirrors. He sat with one hand resting lightly on the table, fingers drumming a silent rhythm against the wood, his expression a mask of detached efficiency. To Naomi, he looked every inch the corporate executive he was, a man who negotiated multi-million-dollar mergers for breakfast and viewed emotions as mere variables in an equation to be solved and discarded. The judge, a stern woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pinned in a severe bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, cleared her throat once, the sound slicing through the stillness like a blade. Her black robe rustled faintly as she raised her gavel, a heavy oak instrument with a worn handle smoothed by countless strikes. The chamber held its collective breath for a suspended moment, the only movement the subtle rise and fall of chests in the room. Then, with a decisive arc, the gavel descended, striking the sounding block with a sharp crack that reverberated off the walls. It echoed through the space like the resounding slam of a massive iron door closing forever, sealing away all possibilities of reversal. The final decree was pronounced in the judge's measured, gravelly voice. The marriage of Naomi Ellis and Julian Stone is hereby dissolved. All terms as outlined in the settlement agreement are binding. Court adjourned. And just like that, it was over. 4 years of meticulously exchanged vows, spoken under a canopy of blooming cherry blossoms on a crisp spring afternoon in a garden overlooking the Hudson River. 4 years of whispered promises made in the dim glow of bedside lamps during late-night confessions. 4 years of dreams that had started as vibrant tapestries of shared futures, but had frayed into tatters under the relentless strain of Julian's relentless ambition, and Naomi's quiet pleas for a life beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. All of it dissolved into the vast, echoing silence of the courtroom. The spectators shifted in their seats, gathering briefcases and purses with subdued murmurs. But Naomi felt the world narrow to the space between her and the man across the table. Her heart, which had once beat in sync with his during stolen weekends in Paris and lazy Sundays tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, now hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird desperate for escape. Julian leaned forward then, his movements deliberate and unhurried, as if the gravity of the moment held no sway over him. He reached into the leather portfolio at his side, a monogrammed piece from a Milanese artisan, its supple hide embossed with his initials, and extracted a slim manila folder. With a fluid push, he slid it across the table's surface, the papers inside whispering against the wood like a secret being confided. The folder did not contain just the divorce decree, stamped and notarized with the court's official seal, but also a single sheet folded with meticulous care, a bank check drawn on his personal account at one of the city's most exclusive private banks. The amount scrawled in precise blue ink was staggering, 7 figures, more than most working families would accumulate over an entire lifetime of disciplined saving and overtime shifts. It was enough to purchase a spacious home in the suburbs, fund a top-tier education, and still leave a cushion for unforeseen storms. To Julian, it was a rounding error in his portfolio. To Naomi, it was a cold, calculated severance pay for her devotion. "Take it, Naomi," Julian said, his voice low and even, carrying the polished timbre of a man accustomed to closing deals in smoke-filled lounges. He met her eyes directly, his gaze steady and devoid of warmth, like polished steel. "It should cover everything you need for a fresh start. Housing, relocation if you choose, even some investments to grow it over time. And handle the rest." The last words hung in the air, weighted with implication, his fingers tapping once more on the table as if punctuating the offer. Naomi's gaze dropped to the folder, tracing the crisp edges where the papers met, then lifted slowly to his face. The words, "the rest," landed in her mind with the force of a physical blow, stirring the nausea that had become her constant companion these past weeks. She had discovered the pregnancy only a month earlier, during a routine checkup prompted by unrelenting fatigue and a sensitivity to coffee that had puzzled her at first. The ultrasound image, grainy black and white pixels forming the tiny curve of a lima bean with a fluttering heartbeat, had filled her with a fierce, protective joy amid the wreckage of their crumbling marriage. She had imagined telling Julian over a quiet dinner, perhaps with candlelight and his favorite Bordeaux, envisioning a softening in his eyes, a bridge back to the man she had fallen for, the charming entrepreneur who had swept her off her feet at a tech conference mixer with stories of building empires from code and caffeine. "The rest?" she echoed, her voice emerging quieter than she intended, threaded with a tremor she couldn't fully suppress. The word tasted bitter on her tongue, like aspirin dissolving too slowly. His jaw clenched visibly, the muscle along the side twitching once under the smooth-shaven skin. He exhaled through his nose, a controlled breath that spoke volumes of restrained impatience. "The pregnancy," he clarified, leaning back slightly in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "End it. Arrange for a procedure, discreetly, of course. I can recommend a clinic upstate, one that handles these matters with complete confidentiality. That child doesn't belong in my world, Naomi, and deep down, in that practical part of you I've always admired, You know it. My schedule alone, global travel, investor meetings at all hours, leaves no room for diapers and doctor's visits. And the scrutiny, the headlines if it leaked, it would derail everything I've built. Her breath snagged in her throat, a sharp intake that bordered on a gasp. The sheer audacity of his words crashed over her like a rogue wave, cold and unrelenting. The cruelty in them was not born of rage, but of indifference, a surgical precision that sliced deeper for its lack of heat. He spoke of fatherhood as if it were a contractual clause to be renegotiated or redacted, something erasable with a signature and a wire transfer. He believed that money, a stack of digits in a bank ledger, could enter not only the remnants of her love, the late-night texts she had sent him from halfway across the world during his business trips, the anniversaries marked with handwritten notes and home-cooked meals, but also the fragile, insistent life pulsing within her. That heartbeat, faint but fierce, had become her anchor in the tempest of betrayal, a reminder that some creations endured beyond dissolution. "You think this is something you can buy off, Julian?" Naomi asked, her voice gaining a quiet steel now, each word measured and clear, rising from the well of resolve she had tapped into during the endless nights of counseling sessions and whispered arguments in their cavernous Manhattan apartment. She uncrossed her fingers, placing her hands flat on the table, mirroring his posture but infusing it with her own unyielding presence. "You think writing a check, scribbling numbers on paper, erases what you've done to us? Erases the late nights I spent waiting for you to come home from one more meeting, the promises you made about starting a family once the company stabilized? Erases a heartbeat? That tiny rhythm I heard for the first time last week, stronger than any echo in this room?" His lips curved upward in the barest suggestion of a smirk, a fleeting expression that didn't reach his eyes. Those cool hazel orbs that had once sparkled with mischief during their courtship. It was the smirk of a man who had anticipated resistance and prepared his counterarguments in advance, like slides in a PowerPoint presentation. "Don't make this harder than it already is, Naomi," he replied, his tone dipping into condescension, as if she were a junior associate fumbling a pitch. "We're both adults. This, us. It's run its course. The money gives you freedom, options. Clinging to complications only prolongs the pain. For both of us." The word complications ignited something final within her, a spark that spread through her veins like liquid fire. She reached out, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her core, and closed the folder with a soft snap. The check remained inside, untouched and unwanted, a symbol of everything he valued over the intangible bonds of flesh and feeling. She didn't crave his wealth. The modest salary from her job as a graphic designer had sustained her independence long before him, funding her small studio apartment filled with canvases and half-finished sketches. She didn't seek his pity, that hollow facsimile of empathy he doled out like corporate perks. All she desired now was distance, an expanse as vast as the ocean between continents, from him, from the searing pain of his dismissals, from the gilded cage of expectations he had built around their life together. Distance to breathe, to rebuild, to nurture what he deemed disposable. Without uttering another syllable, Naomi rose to her feet, the wooden chair legs scraping faintly against the floor, a minor protest in the grand theater of finality. She gathered her purse, a simple leather tote that had been a gift from her sister, and turned toward the double doors at the far end of the room. Her low-heeled pumps, practical black leather, chosen for comfort over style, struck the cool marble floor with deliberate, echoing steps. Each impact resonated like a declaration, pulling her incrementally further from the man who had fractured her spirit in fractures too numerous and deep for any sum to mend. The forgotten birthdays, the canceled vacations, the gradual erosion of intimacy into parallel lives under one roof. The heavy oak doors swung open with a hydraulic sigh, and Naomi stepped into the corridor beyond, where the air shifted from stale confinement to the crisp bite of early autumn. Outside the courthouse proper, she pushed through the main entrance, descending the wide granite steps to the bustling sidewalk of the city street. The cool breeze off the nearby river slapped against her flushed cheeks like a benediction, carrying hints of fallen leaves and distant rain. Car horns blared in the distance. Pedestrians hurried past in wool coats and scarves, their breaths visible in the chill. But Naomi paused at the bottom step, grounding herself in the rhythm of the world moving forward. Instinctively, her right hand drifted to her abdomen, pressing gently over the soft fabric of her dress, right where the life within stirred in quiet defiance. The gesture was intimate, a vow sealed in the privacy of her own resolve. A small smile, tentative but genuine, tugged at the corners of her lips, the first unforced expression she had worn in months. It softened the lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the faint shadows from sleepless nights spent poring over lease agreements and job listings. "You will live," she whispered to the tiny form she protected, her voice barely audible over the city's hum, yet carrying the full weight of her determination. "You will thrive in a world of your own making, filled with colors and stories and love that no amount of money can buy. And even if he never deserves to know you, never earns the right to witness your first steps or hear your laughter, you will be enough. We will be enough." With that, Naomi straightened her shoulders, adjusted the strap of her purse, and merged into the flow of the sidewalk crowd. The future stretched before her, uncertain but unbound, a canvas waiting for her brushstrokes. Behind her, the courthouse loomed like a relic of what had been. Ahead lay the uncharted paths of single motherhood, creative pursuits, and the quiet strength she had always possessed but only now fully claimed. The wind picked up, rustling the edges of her coat, and she walked on, one resolute step at a time, toward the life she would build from the ashes of the old. Julian Stone hated anything left unfinished. He saw people as business deals, feelings as trades, and errors as problems to fix fast. Right after the divorce papers were signed and stamped, he got to work tying up every detail. That same afternoon, in his large corner office on the 45th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, his assistant, a sharp young woman named Carla with a neat bob haircut and a tablet always in hand, walked in quietly. She carried a thick manila envelope, its edges crisp and sealed with red tape. The office itself was a show of his success, walls lined with dark wood panels, a massive desk made of polished mahogany, and shelves filled with leather-bound books he rarely opened, and awards from tech conferences he had dominated. The air smelled of fresh coffee from the machine in the corner and the faint leather scent of his high-backed chair. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the city grid below like a map of his conquests. Carla placed the envelope squarely in front of him on the desk, next to a stack of reports on quarterly earnings. Julian, dressed in his usual crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing a gold watch that cost more than a year's rent, glanced up from his computer screen. His face showed no emotion, just the focused look of a man closing a sale. "It's the confirmation," Carla said in a low, professional voice. She waited as he opened the envelope with a quick slice of a silver letter opener. Inside lay a single printed sheet, proof of a wire transfer from his private account to Naomi's bank. The amount was huge, $8 million, a sum so large it could buy a luxury house, pay for college for several kids, and still leave plenty for travel and savings. It was more money than Naomi, with her steady job as a freelance illustrator, could earn in decades of hard work. Julian scanned the page, his dark eyes moving fast over the numbers and codes. He nodded once, picked up a pen from a holder shaped like a modern sculpture, and signed the attached cover letter without a pause. His signature was bold and looping, the mark of a man who decided and moved on. "Send it to her account right now," he told Carla, sliding the papers back across the desk. His voice was flat, like he was ordering lunch. "And add a note. Make sure she understands the terms clearly. The medical procedure has to happen soon. I don't want any issues coming up later. No surprises, no claims." Carla nodded carefully, her expression neutral. She had worked for Julian for 3 years and knew his rules. Keep things efficient, avoid drama. She gathered the envelope and turned toward the door, her low heels clicking softly on the thick gray carpet. As the door clicked shut behind her, Julian leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. The message in that note would be direct. The money was not a kind gesture or a parting gift. It was payment, plain and simple. Payment to keep Naomi quiet about the divorce details. Payment to cover the cost of ending the pregnancy she had mentioned in their last heated argument. Payment to wipe away every sign of what Julian saw as her weakness, the emotional pull she had on him, the way she had pushed for more time together instead of letting him chase his next big deal. In his world of board meetings and stock prices, vulnerabilities like unplanned children were risks he could not afford. They could distract him, leak to the press, or worse, humanize him in ways that made investors nervous. But Naomi Ellis had no intention of taking that money. She sat in her small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Brooklyn, a cozy space with mismatched furniture she had picked up from flea markets and walls covered in her own colorful sketches of city scenes and imagined landscapes. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting stripes on the worn wooden floor. Her phone, an older model with a cracked screen protector, buzzed on the kitchen table next to a half-eaten sandwich and a mug of herbal tea. She picked it up, her thumb swiping to open the banking app. The notification popped up in bold, "Incoming transfer, $8 million." From Julian's account. Her heart skipped, not from excitement, but from a mix of disgust and resolve. She stared at the screen for a full minute, the numbers blurring slightly as her eyes filled with unshed tears. This was his final play, trying to control her choices with cash, as if her life and her babies were items on a balance sheet. Naomi's hand shook a little as she tapped into the transfer details. There it was, the attached note from his assistant. "As discussed, funds for relocation and medical needs. Procedure required for full settlement." She read it twice, her stomach twisting. Required. Like it was a clause in a contract, not a life inside her. She thought back to the doctor's visit 2 weeks ago, the cool gel on her belly, the wand pressing gently, the whoosh of the heartbeat filling the room like a promise. That sound had anchored her through the divorce hearings, reminding her of what mattered. With a deep breath, she selected the return option in the app. Confirm. Send back. The screen flashed processing, and then it was done. All $8 million, untouched, routed straight back to Julian's account. No note from her, no explanation. The act itself spoke volumes. "You do not own me. You do not own this baby. You do not get to decide our future with your wallet." It was her clean break, louder than any shout or plea she could have made in court. By the time Carla knocked on Julian's office door an hour later, her face pale and her tablet clutched tightly, Naomi was already packing the last of her things. "Sir," Carla said, stepping inside and closing the door. "The funds, they've been returned, in full. No message." Julian's head snapped up from the email he was typing. For a split second, his calm cracked, a flash of surprise in his eyes quickly buried. "Returned?" he repeated, his voice steady but edged with ice. Carla nodded, showing him the confirmation on her screen. He waved her out without another word, turning back to his computer as if it were a minor glitch. But inside, a knot formed in his gut. He had calculated every angle. The money would buy her compliance, her exit, her silence. Now it was thrown back like trash. Naomi moved fast after that. She had planned this in the quiet hours after the courtroom, when the sting of Julian's words still burned. Her apartment, once filled with shared photos and his forgotten ties draped over chairs, now echoed with emptiness. She loaded 2 suitcases into a cab, one with clothes and sketchbooks, the other with prenatal vitamins, a few framed drawings from her late mother, and a stuffed bear she had bought on impulse for the baby. The locks clicked shut behind her, the key left in the super's box with a note about breaking the lease early. She logged into her social media accounts, Instagram with its feed of art shows and couple selfies that now felt like lies, Facebook with old family posts, and hit delete. One by one, profiles vanished into the digital void. Her phone, the one tied to their joint bills, she powered off and left on the kitchen counter, a new prepaid SIM card already in a burner phone in her purse. By evening, she was a ghost in Julian's world. No trace, no trail, no way to pull her back. Julian learned of her disappearance the next morning, during his routine 7 a.m. check-in with Carla. "She's gone," Carla reported over the phone as he sipped black coffee in his penthouse condo, the skyline stretching out like a kingdom. Apartment cleared out. No forwarding address. Accounts wiped. Numbers dead. He hung up without thanks, striding to the wall of windows that overlooked the Hudson River. The city lights twinkled below, cars crawling like ants on veins of concrete. He stood there, hands in his pockets, suit jacket slung over a chair. For a brief second, something stirred in his chest, not just anger at the defiance, but a sharper pang, like loss or regret. The kind he had trained himself to ignore since his own father's abandonment years ago. Was it the baby? The what-if of a family he had dismissed? Or just the bruise to his ego from a deal that failed? He shook it off, crossing to the bar cart in the corner. Crystal decanter in hand, he poured 2 fingers of scotch, top shelf, smooth as silk, into a heavy glass. The first sip burned down his throat, warm and familiar, washing away the flicker. He raised the glass to the view. "Good riddance," he muttered to the empty room. In his mind, it was settled. Naomi was erased, a past error filed away, a chapter slammed shut. His empire of apps and investments waited, demanding his full attention. No room for ghosts, but Naomi Ellis was anything but erased. Her vanishing act came from deep strength, not fear or running scared. She had weighed her options in the divorce lawyer's dim office, choosing pride over begging for scraps, grace over groveling for attention. Most of all, she chose her child, a tiny growing person with 10 little fingers and a future full of possibilities, over Julian's cold cash and strings attached. That choice freed her, like shedding heavy chains. As dusk fell, Naomi stood at the Port Authority bus terminal, a chaotic hub of fluorescent lights, echoing announcements and travelers hauling bags. The air smelled of pretzels from a nearby stand and exhaust from idling buses. She bought a ticket for a late-night coach to a small town in upstate New York, far enough for fresh air and quiet streets, close enough for occasional city visits. The bus, a silver Greyhound with worn seats, pulled up to the curb. She climbed aboard, finding a window seat near the back. The engine rumbled to life, and as the doors hissed shut, she settled in, her hand resting gently on her stomach. Beneath her palm, she felt the subtle flutter, a reminder of life pushing forward. Outside, the city blurred past, neon signs of Times Square fading to warehouses and bridges, then to darker highways lined with trees. Behind her, she left the ruins of what started as love. Romantic dinners turning to arguments, shared dreams crumbling under his ambition. It had become a battle she refused to lose by staying. Ahead lay unknowns, a rented room above a bookstore, job hunts for illustration gigs, doctor's appointments in a new clinic. But with them came hope. A nursery painted soft blue, bedtime stories read aloud, first words and wobbly steps. What Julian could not see from his high perch of power was the power in her choice. That heartbeat she carried, strong and steady, was no loose end. It was a beginning. One day, years from now, it would grow into a force, curious, bold, unbreakable, that would challenge everything Julian built. His walls of control, his transactions without heart, would crack under the weight of a truth he tried to bury. But for now, Naomi leaned her head against the cool glass, watching stars prick the night sky. She was free, and her child would know a world built on love, not ledgers. The city Naomi left behind was loud, ruthless, and unforgiving. She stepped away from it with nothing but a suitcase, a few $100s in her wallet, and the steady beat of a life growing inside her. Her first stop was a small town 2 hours away, the kind of place where people still waved to strangers on the street and neighbors remembered your name after meeting you once. She rented a modest one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards. It was nothing like the luxury penthouse she had shared with Julian, but it was hers. And for the first time in years, she felt a fragile kind of peace. But peace did not mean ease. The mornings were hardest. The nausea hit like waves, and there were days when Naomi struggled to drag herself out of bed. She took odd jobs, waitressing at a diner, helping stock shelves at a corner store, anything to pay the bills and keep the lights on. Every dollar mattered. Every ounce of strength had to be rationed. Some nights she cried herself to sleep, not out of regret, but out of exhaustion. Carrying life while carrying heartbreak was heavier than she had imagined. Yet each time despair crept in, she would place her hand over her stomach and whisper, "We're going to be okay. I'll make sure of it." As her belly grew, so did her determination. She started attending prenatal classes at the local community center, making friends with women who knew nothing of her past. To them, she was just Naomi, the quiet woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. She never spoke Julian's name. She never mentioned the world of glass towers and billion-dollar deals she had once lived in. She was no longer Julian Stone's wife. She was simply Naomi Ellis, a woman fighting for her child's future. In her solitude, she discovered pieces of herself she had long forgotten. She rediscovered her love for sketching, filling pages with designs for clothes she dreamed of one day creating. She found strength in community, laughter in shared meals with her neighbors, and comfort in knowing that even without wealth, she still had dignity. And yet, in her quiet moments, his shadow lingered. There were times she wondered if Julian ever thought of her, if he regretted the cruel way he had dismissed their child, if the man who believed himself untouchable ever felt the weight of what he had lost. 9 months passed slowly but steadily. Naomi had changed. She was no longer the broken woman who had walked out of the courtroom with tears threatening to fall. She was stronger now, braver, more grounded. And soon she would bring a new life into the world, one born not out of Julian's arrogance, but out of her defiance, her love, and her resolve. What she didn't know was that fate had no intention of keeping her hidden forever. Because the world she had escaped and the man she thought she had left behind were about to crash back into her life in the most unexpected way. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers the size of small cars, each crystal catching the light like diamonds. It was the kind of event Julian Stone excelled at. Champagne flowing, cameras flashing, deals made with a handshake and a smile that never touched his eyes. He stood near the center, surrounded by investors and board members, his aura sharp as ever. Power clung to him like an invisible cloak. He had built his reputation on control, on never being caught off guard. But that night, control betrayed him. The moment Naomi Ellis stepped into the room, Julian forgot how to breathe. She was radiant. The sleek black gown she wore flowed around her curves. Her hair framed her face like a crown, and her hand rested lightly, protectively, over the swell of her belly. Her very presence was a declaration. She had survived without him, and she was carrying life he had once ordered erased. Conversations faltered, eyes turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like sparks leaping from a flame. Julian's glass nearly shattered in his hand. He forced himself to place it on the nearest table, his gaze locked on her as if she were the only person in the room. Naomi hadn't expected to see him here. She hadn't expected the hush that fell, as if the entire ballroom itself held its breath. But she didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, walked forward with measured grace, and greeted an older couple at the far end of the room, pretending she hadn't noticed him. But Julian noticed, every detail. The way her glow made her more breathtaking than ever. The way she carried herself, unbroken, unashamed. The way her stomach curved beneath her gown, undeniable evidence of the child she had chosen to keep. His chest burned with something fierce and primal. Anger, betrayal, panic, possession. The investors around him spoke, but their voices blurred into noise. He moved through the crowd with single-minded focus until he stood behind her. Naomi. Her name was a low growl in his throat, and though she hadn't heard it in months, it still sliced through her like a blade. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, thick with everything left unsaid. Then his eyes dropped to her stomach. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. "You never—" His words stuck. He swallowed hard, the mask of the unshakable CEO cracking for the first time in years. "You never went through with it." Naomi's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. "No, Julian, I didn't." The room had grown quieter, ears straining to catch fragments of the confrontation. Cameras flashed discreetly in the background, hungry for scandal. Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice but unable to contain the fury in it. "Whose child is that, Naomi?" She held his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Does it matter?" The crowd gasped at the audacity in her tone, though only those nearest could truly hear the words. Julian's pulse thundered in his ears. For the first time in his carefully calculated life, he wasn't the one dictating the terms. And Naomi Ellis walked away from him, her hand resting protectively over her belly, leaving him standing in the middle of the glittering ballroom with questions that clawed at him like fire. The gala ended in chaos. By the time the music slowed and the last toast was made, whispers had already spilled across the city. Naomi Ellis was pregnant, and she had walked into the lion's den glowing like a woman reborn, while Julian Stone, the untouchable CEO, had been caught visibly shaken. Flashes exploded as paparazzi camped outside the ballroom, eager for the perfect shot. Naomi tried to slip out through the back exit, her arm wrapped around her stomach, her heels clicking against the polished floor. But Julian was faster. He caught her wrist before she reached the door, pulling her into the shadows of a corridor away from prying eyes. The grip wasn't cruel, but it was desperate, the kind of touch that carried both rage and possession. "You've been hiding," Julian said, his voice low, a dangerous whisper. 9 months, Naomi, 9 months you vanished, and now you show up like this, pregnant, glowing, flaunting it in front of the world. Naomi yanked her wrist free, fire in her eyes. "I didn't vanish. I left you. There's a difference. You handed me a check and told me to erase our child. I refused. That's all this is." The sound of shutters snapping grew louder outside. A reporter's voice called Naomi's name, followed by the pounding of feet. They were closing in. Julian stepped closer, his chest rising with sharp breaths. "Whose is it, Naomi? Tell me right now." Naomi's laugh was bitter, almost sharp enough to cut glass. "Does it make you lose sleep, Julian? Not knowing if the child I'm carrying is yours?" The words hit like a blade, and for the first time Julian's composure fractured completely. He slammed a hand against the wall beside her, not touching her, but caging her in. The move was primal, feral, a man on the edge of control. "You think this is a game?" he hissed. "You think you can walk into my world pregnant and not expect me to demand answers?" Naomi's chin lifted. "You don't deserve answers. You paid to kill this child. You don't get to claim it now." Before Julian could respond, the corridor flooded with light. Paparazzi had broken through, cameras flashing like wildfire. Voices shouted, questions flying. "Naomi, is Julian the father? Julian, are you going to claim the baby? Why did she disappear for 9 months?" Security rushed in, shoving photographers back, but not before dozens of photos were snapped. Julian towering over Naomi, her defiance blazing, his fury barely restrained. Julian grabbed her arm again, but this time softer, almost pleading beneath the storm. "You can't just walk away from me, not now, not like this." Naomi looked at him, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "I already did." And with that, she slipped past him, straight into the blinding flashes of the paparazzi. For once, Julian Stone was left in the shadows, his empire of control unraveling by the second. 2 days after the gala, the headlines were everywhere. CEO Julian Stone confronts ex-wife Naomi Ellis at charity gala. Baby scandal brewing. Mystery pregnancy shocks high society. Is the billionaire a father-to-be? Julian's boardroom buzzed with whispers, but he shut them down with the sharpness of a single glare. Still, no matter how many fires he put out in business, he couldn't extinguish the one consuming him inside. Naomi's face, her words, her swollen belly, they followed him like a curse. He needed answers. He needed control. And then one night, he saw her again. Naomi was leaving a quiet restaurant on the edge of the city, laughter spilling from her lips. Beside her walked a man, tall, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. His hand rested lightly on the small of Naomi's back, protective, familiar. Julian's chest tightened. Adrian Cross, a name Julian knew well, philanthropist, investor. A man admired for his charitable foundations and hated in silence by competitors who could never match his effortless charisma. He was everything Julian despised, because he was everything Julian wasn't. And now he was with Naomi. Julian stepped out of the shadows, his presence halting them both. The street lamps threw sharp lines across his face, his jaw clenched tight. Naomi froze, but Adrian shifted subtly, stepping half a pace in front of her. Julian's voice was low, dangerous. "So this is where you've been hiding, Naomi? With him?" Naomi's eyes narrowed. "I don't owe you an explanation." Adrian's gaze didn't waver as he studied Julian. "You must be Julian Stone." Julian's lip curled. "And you must be the man who thinks he can raise what doesn't belong to him." The tension crackled like electricity. Passers-by slowed, sensing a storm brewing. Naomi stepped between them before the confrontation could spiral further. "This isn't about you, Julian," she said firmly. "It stopped being about you the moment you tried to buy my child's death." The words landed like a blade twisting in his chest, but before he could respond, Adrian placed a steady hand on Naomi's arm. "Come on, we're leaving." They turned, walking away together into the night. Julian's fists clenched at his sides, his heart pounding with a rage he couldn't control. He could not stand the sight of another man protecting her, walking with her, claiming what was his by blood. But deep down, beneath the fury, was something more dangerous. Fear. Because for the first time in his life, Julian Stone wasn't sure if money, power, or force could bring Naomi, or their child, back to him. Julian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office long after midnight, city lights flickering beneath his windows, his drink untouched on the desk. The image replayed again and again. Adrian's hand on Naomi, her soft laughter, the glow of her face when she looked at him. It was unbearable. By dawn, Julian had already made a call. "Find me everything on Adrian Cross, finances, assets, associates. I want to know where he eats, where he sleeps, who he trusts, and I want it on my desk yesterday." His private investigator didn't ask questions. He knew better. Julian leaned back in his chair, fury hardening into resolve. If Adrian thought he could slide into Naomi's life and steal what was his, he was wrong. This wasn't just jealousy. It was war. Meanwhile, Naomi was trying to hold on to the fragile peace she had built. Adrian had been her anchor through the storm. He wasn't her lover, though the world thought otherwise, but he had been there when she was alone, when her body was breaking under the weight of pregnancy, when fear threatened to drown her. At a small cafe the next morning, Adrian studied her over a cup of coffee. "You know he won't let this go, Naomi." Her hands cradled her belly protectively. "I know, but I won't run again. I'm done hiding." Adrian's brow furrowed. "Then be ready. Men like Julian don't fight fair." Naomi forced a smile, though her heart was heavy. "Neither do I, when it comes to protecting my child." 2 nights later, Julian's men followed Adrian. A sleek car trailed him through quiet streets, cameras snapping, records being made. They uncovered charity donations, board members, offshore accounts. On paper, Adrian was clean. Too clean. Julian slammed the folder shut in frustration. No one is that perfect. His jaw tightened as he stared at a photograph. Adrian, standing beside Naomi at a clinic entrance, his hand steadying her as she stepped inside. Julian's fury burned hotter. If Adrian wanted to play guardian, Julian would tear him down piece by piece, until Naomi had no one left to lean on but him. Naomi didn't trust the world outside anymore. Every headline, every whispered conversation in a cafe, every paparazzi flash felt like a blade waiting to cut her open. But inside Adrian's townhouse, a quiet place lined with books and warm light, she found rare peace. It wasn't love. It wasn't romance. It was safety. Adrian was steady in ways she hadn't realized she needed. He drove her to doctor's appointments when her body grew too heavy. He made sure she ate when nausea stole her appetite. He reminded her to breathe when the weight of it all threatened to crush her. This evening was no different. Naomi sat on the couch, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, as Adrian returned from the kitchen with tea. He placed the cup gently in front of her and leaned back in his chair. "You're strong," Adrian said quietly. "Stronger than you think." Naomi's lips curved in a faint smile, though her eyes shimmered. "Strong doesn't mean I'm not tired." He nodded. "Then lean on the people who care about you." Her gaze softened. "That's the problem, Adrian. Every time I've leaned on someone, they've broken me." Silence lingered between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Adrian didn't press. He just sat there, a silent reminder that she wasn't as alone as she believed. But outside, watching from the shadows of his black car, Julian's patience fractured. Through the glass, he saw them together. Her laughter, her fragile tears, Adrian's calm presence. It looked intimate, too intimate. His chest burned, his throat tight. He wanted to storm inside, to tear her away, to remind her that the child in her belly was his. But he didn't move. He only watched, fury twisting with something far more dangerous: fear. For the first time in his life, Julian Stone felt like an outsider to his own family. And it terrified him. Inside, Naomi shifted on the couch, her voice quiet but firm. "Whatever happens when the baby comes, I won't let Julian decide my life again. Not this time." Adrian's eyes were steady. "Then we fight. Together." Naomi closed her eyes, one hand gripping her belly. She didn't see the figure outside, didn't feel the storm gathering just beyond the glass. But Julian saw everything, and he wasn't going to lose. Not to Adrian, not to anyone. Julian didn't storm Naomi's sanctuary. He didn't break down the door or throw accusations like a jealous boy. No, Julian Stone never fought in the open. He fought with silence, with signatures, with the kind of power that could ruin a man without leaving fingerprints. By morning, his plan was already in motion. A quiet phone call to the head of the financial authority. A subtle suggestion whispered to a journalist eager for blood. A tip leaked about possible misuse of charity funds in one of Adrian Cross's foundations. The ripple spread fast. By noon, the markets buzzed with rumors. Adrian's name trended online. News anchors speculated, investors hesitated, and board members panicked. Julian sat back in his office, expression carved from stone, watching it all unfold. To the world, he was simply handling business. But in truth, this wasn't about markets or money. It was about Naomi. It was about making Adrian so busy putting out fires that he had no time left to stand beside her. Meanwhile, Naomi noticed the tension immediately. She found Adrian on the phone, his voice tight as he spoke with lawyers and accountants. When he hung up, she asked, "What's happening?" Adrian rubbed a hand over his face. "Someone's trying to drag my name through the mud, false accusations. It'll clear, but it'll take time." Naomi frowned. "And you think this has something to do with Julian?" The name was bitter on Adrian's tongue. "Yes. Who else?" Her heart clenched. She wanted to deny it, to believe Julian wouldn't sink that low. But she'd seen the way Julian looked at them together. She knew what jealousy could do to a man with too much power. Her anger burned hotter than fear. "He doesn't get to decide my life anymore." But in the back of her mind, she knew Julian always got what he wanted. From his penthouse, Julian poured a drink he didn't taste, eyes fixed on the chaos he had unleashed. For now, Adrian Cross was bleeding, and Julian Stone always finished what he started. But control is a fragile thing. For all Julian's precision, all his cold, calculated strikes, one moment of raw emotion was all it took to unravel him. It happened at a charity luncheon 2 weeks later. Naomi arrived with Adrian, steady, calm, unshaken by the rumors swirling around him. She looked radiant despite the weight she carried, her hand resting protectively over her belly, and Julian lost it. He wasn't supposed to be there. He hadn't planned it. But when he walked into the ballroom and saw them together again, laughter in her eyes meant for someone else, something inside him snapped. The room stilled as Julian crossed the floor, his voice carrying like a blade. "Tell me, Naomi, does he know the truth? That child you flaunt, it's mine, not his." Gasps erupted around them. Cameras flashed. The scandal that had only simmered until now ignited into wildfire. Naomi's face drained of color. Adrian moved instinctively to shield her, but Julian shoved past him, eyes blazing. "You can parade him around all you want," Julian snarled, "but that baby carries my blood. You think you can hide from me? From us?" The silence was suffocating. Naomi's hand trembled against her belly as her voice broke through, sharp and furious. "You don't get to claim us now, Julian, not after what you did." The words rang louder than his accusations. Every eye in the room turned, not to him, but to her. And for the first time, Julian realized his power couldn't silence Naomi. He had made himself the villain in front of the entire world. Julian had never known silence like this. Not the silence of his penthouse, perched above the restless city. Not the silence after a boardroom victory. No, this silence was heavier, colder. It pressed down on him like a judgment, echoing every word Naomi had thrown at him in front of the world. "You don't get to claim us now, Julian. Not after what you did. The scandal dominated every news outlet. Photos of him snarling at Naomi, headlines dissecting every syllable of his rage. Stock prices wavered, board members called in panic, but none of it mattered. What haunted him wasn't the world's reaction. It was Naomi's face, the fear in her eyes, the trembling hand over her belly, the steel in her voice when she pushed him away. For the first time in his life, Julian Stone felt like the villain in his own story. The phone rang. Again. He ignored it. His office door opened, but he didn't look up until his sister Evelyn walked in. She tossed the morning paper onto his desk. His face glared back at him from the front page. Billionaire tyrant humiliates pregnant ex-wife in public. "You've lost your damn mind," Evelyn said flatly. Julian's jaw tightened. "Stay out of it." "No," she snapped. "I won't. I warned you years ago that your pride would destroy everything you touched, and now you've just proved me right." Julian stood, fists curling. "She's carrying my child, Evelyn. Mine. Do you expect me to sit back while another man parades around like... Like what?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Like the father you refused to be when she begged you to keep your own child. Like the man who didn't try to buy his own child's death." The words hit harder than any headline. Julian staggered back, the truth searing through him. Evelyn's eyes softened just enough to twist the blade deeper. "You don't need another scheme, Julian. You need forgiveness. But you won't get it by tearing Adrian apart or humiliating Naomi. If you want her back," Evelyn's voice broke, "you're going to have to bleed for it." That night, Julian sat alone in the nursery he had built in secret months ago. The crib sat untouched, the walls painted soft ivory, a rocking chair in the corner. It should have been a place of hope. Instead, it mocked him with the life he had almost destroyed. For the first time in years, Julian Stone dropped to his knees, his hand gripping the crib rail. His chest ached, his breath uneven. No empire, no fortune, no calculation could save him now. If he wanted Naomi back, if he wanted to be the father his child deserved, he would have to change. Not for show, not for control, but for love. For the first time in his life, Julian Stone was ready to fight. Not to win, but to be worthy. Julian had spent weeks building empires with precision, striking down rivals without mercy. Yet when it came to Naomi, he couldn't even decide how to knock on a door. The bouquet in his hands felt foreign. He had never bought flowers in his life. He didn't even know if she liked roses or lilies, but he remembered once, years ago, she'd stopped in front of a florist's shop, her eyes lingering on white lilies with a softness he had never forgotten. So now he stood outside Adrian's townhouse, clutching them like a lifeline, his throat dry. He raised his hand, knocked once, twice. The door opened. Naomi stood there, her belly round, her face weary but strong. The moment her eyes met his, the silence was deafening. Julian's voice was low, stripped of its usual sharpness. "Naomi, I came to say I'm sorry." Her body went rigid. "Sorry doesn't erase what you've done." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. But I need you to believe me. I'm not here to fight. Not with you. Not with him." His jaw tightened. "I'm here because I want to be better. For you. For the baby." Naomi's laugh was bitter, her hand tightening over her belly. "You don't get to walk in and decide that now, Julian. You had your chance. You chose money, power, and control over us. I nearly died alone because of you." Each word was a blade, but Julian didn't flinch. He let them pierce. He deserved them. He extended the lilies toward her. "I don't expect forgiveness today or tomorrow. I need you to know I'll wait. I'll prove it." For the first time, Naomi's eyes flickered, not with forgiveness, but with something more dangerous, hope. She hated that it lingered, hated herself for still wanting to believe him. Behind her, Adrian appeared, his steady voice breaking the moment. "You should go, Stone." Julian nodded once, his grip on the flowers tightening. "I'll go, but I won't stop." He set the lilies on the step and turned, his shoulders heavier than the world he carried on them. Naomi stood frozen as the door shut, staring at the flowers. She didn't touch them. Not yet. But she didn't throw them away either. Her heart was a battlefield. Between the pain Julian had caused, the safety Adrian gave, and the stubborn, foolish love that refused to die. Naomi lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. The lilies sat in a vase by the window, their pale petals opening wider as if mocking her. She told herself she should have thrown them out. She told herself she hated him, that she had every reason to keep the door shut forever. And yet, her heart betrayed her. Every time the baby shifted inside her, she remembered Julian's voice outside Adrian's townhouse. "I'm here because I want to be better. For you. For the baby." She hated that it didn't sound like the ruthless man she'd once married. It sounded like the boy she had fallen in love with years ago, before power hardened him. But could she trust it? Could a man like Julian Stone truly change? Julian, meanwhile, was not the same man who once wielded power like a weapon. He began quietly, without fanfare. Naomi never saw the anonymous donations he funneled into maternal health programs under her name. She didn't see the way he cut ties with partners who profited from cruelty, or how he stepped back from business deals that once defined him. But she did see him waiting outside the clinic when she had her next appointment. No cameras, no entourage, just him. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He only stood at a distance until Adrian guided her inside, then left before she emerged. And again, the next time, and the next. It was maddening, infuriating, and disarming. One afternoon, Naomi finally snapped. She found him in the hospital garden, hands in his pockets, watching children play by the fountain. "Why are you doing this, Julian?" she demanded. His eyes met hers, weary but steady. "Because I want to learn how to love without control, to show up without taking, to be there even if you never let me back in." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, his voice quieter. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if there's even the smallest chance that I can be part of our child's life, even from the edges, I'll take it. I'll prove I'm not the man who walked away." Naomi's heart twisted. She wanted to scream, to push him away, but tears filled her eyes instead. For months, she had fought to be strong, to build a life without him. And yet, here he was, changed, softer, breaking himself open in ways she had never thought possible. For the first time, she wondered if redemption wasn't just a word. Maybe it was real. Maybe he could earn it. The night Naomi went into labor, rain fell in torrents over the city. Adrian drove her to the hospital, steady and calm, but when Julian appeared in the waiting room, drenched and breathless, Naomi didn't send him away. She should have. She had every reason to. But as the contractions tore through her, she saw the terror in his eyes and realized he was no longer the untouchable man she once knew. He was a father, desperate, undone, and terrified of losing what mattered most. Hours later, when the baby's cry filled the room, Julian's knees buckled. Tears, real, unguarded, streamed down his face as Naomi cradled their daughter. Adrian stood silently at the door, watching. He had always known he wasn't her forever, only her shield when she needed one. With a small nod, he turned and left, closing the chapter with quiet dignity. Julian sat at Naomi's side, trembling as he reached for their child. His voice cracked. "She's perfect." Naomi studied him, the weight of years between them heavy in her chest. And then, for the first time, she allowed him to hold their daughter. When the baby's tiny fingers curled around his, Julian broke completely. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve this," he whispered. Naomi's heart softened, not fully healed, not yet, but open. And as she leaned against him, their daughter safe in his arms, she realized something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Julian and Naomi's story reminds us that love is not always a straight line. It's filled with detours, heartbreaks, betrayals, and unexpected reunions. What made their ending powerful wasn't perfection, it was redemption. Julian had once believed money, control, and power were enough to keep what he loved. But in the end, it wasn't his wealth or his influence that won Naomi back. It was humility. It was the courage to change, to wait, and to fight for love in the right way. Naomi, on her part, learned that strength doesn't always mean walking away forever. Sometimes it means daring to hope again, opening the door to forgiveness, and allowing someone to show they've changed. Their love didn't return overnight, but in the cries of their newborn child, in the softness of Julian's whispered vows, and in Naomi's choice to lean on him one last time, they found the beginning of something new. Not the same love as before, not the broken version of their past, but a love reborn. And that, dear listeners, is the sweetest kind of happy ending. Do you believe people can truly change for love, or do you think Julian's redemption was just temporary? If you were Naomi, would you have given him another chance, or kept the door closed forever? Do you think love after betrayal can ever be as strong as it was before? What does forgiveness mean to you? A second chance, or simply letting go? And most importantly, do you think Julian and Naomi's daughter will grow up in a family built on real love this time? If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing your take on these dramatic love stories. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful story of love, betrayal, and redemption. Because every week we dive into the kind of stories that remind us love may stumble, love may break, but in the end, love always finds a way.